So hello, this is Shubham. Uh, First of all, I'm not exactly sure about the sound quality because my table fan is on, and I have to keep it on. It's like 100 degrees outside. It's that hot, and as of 5th July, I think it's the same with everyone, right? It's been that heated. Um, See, I actually am extremely bored right now and naturally at leisure. And this particular exercise I've been discussing of doing for quite some time now. So I thought, why not give it a shot? So, and I'm not going to share this video. The plan is not to share this video with everyone and stuff. It's just, I don't know. Take it as a potential experimental exercise, right? Um, but if someone happens to stumble across the video and decide to watch it, great. Thank you for that. And if there are no views or a couple of views, my own views rather, it's fine. Even in that case, um, the point of this video is strictly academic, um, and I'll be discussing. I'll obviously write the same in the title itself. I'll be discussing the Scarlet Letter. This Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, his magnum opus, and obviously widely considered to be one of the literary masterpieces of American literature. I personally have been extremely lucky because I had two great, wonderful teachers of American literature. The first in my college, it was Monica ma'am, and then in my university, Sam University Silchar, we had SC ma'am, Shimona Chakraborty. So we have been lucky, like my batch in the college and in the university, we've been lucky, like because I've learned a lot, and I'll obviously not be able to nearly replicate um, the way they express, the way they share their knowledge, but I'll try to express whatever I know at the best of my abilities. But where do I begin? uh, I think we can begin with this very, very interesting trivia actually. uh, Not many people know this, but Nathaniel Hawthorne's original family name does not have a W in it. Okay, so it is Hathorne. So you can pronounce it as Hathorne or Hathorne. Uh, so there's one belief system that he changed this family name, this surname, because he wanted to have the correct British spelling. But evidentially speaking, through his own texts, like in American notebooks, and of course in the custom house also, uh, there's a very obvious indication that he did not essentially like some of his forefathers, some of his ancestors. Now obviously most people will think that it might be because of poverty maybe, or some kind of criminal history. But here's the interesting part: he actually did not like the family name because he was ashamed of the power that a couple of his relatives wielded, and how they abused that particular that the power that they had. So instead of letting go of a proper, it's not let go, he just changed it, of a family name for poverty or something like that. He changed the surname because he was guilty of having that particular surname. So it's that in itself is very interesting to begin with. We get the indication of this in the custom house itself. The custom house, by the way, acts as a prologue kind of to the Scarlet Letter, where he uses this moniker. Monica is like a pseudonym, you might say, where he considers himself, he uses the moniker locofoco surveyor for himself. So it has a personal context associated with it, and there he indicates two of his forefathers also. Now, before going to the Scarlet Letter, you are going to find the summaries and the stories in abundance, because see, it's a great literary masterpiece, and many people have read it, reread it, interpreted it in different ways. So the story in itself, you can find it everywhere. Of course, ideally you should read the text. Obviously you should read the text, but it is very important to understand that the Scarlet Letter is not what you find it on its face value. The Scarlet Letter is actually a lot deeper than that. You need to understand that the Scarlet Letter gives us a glimpse of the American history, and the Scarlet Letter will show you elements which are associated directly with America, its creation also, its development also, it's the evils associated with it also. So there are a lot of different elements associated with the Scarlet Letter. So pretty befittingly, but this researcher, this critic, you might consider, Laura Doyle, along with several other critics, of course, consider this text, or the Scarlet Letter, is as something which we call as historical palimpsest. What a palimpsest is, so earlier, couple of centuries back, paper was not as cheap as it is today, right? And there used to be this expensive papers made of animal skin. So when you have such an expensive paper, you read whatever is written there, you do not want to throw it away, or rather you because you have that letter and you've already read it, so instead of keeping it, preserving it, you might use this paper for rewriting. That is what many people used to do, rather. So what they did was, they would bathe that particular paper in milk, keep it overnight. The next day they would put some grain and some chalk on it, and they'll compress it tight so that there are no wrinkles. And after it's dried, it seems like a very fresh paper on which you can write, and naturally people used to write on it again. Now here is the very, very interesting part. Over time, whatever was written before also starts reappearing like ghosts, okay, because of exposure, of course. So picture this. So there's this paper. On the surface level, you can find the fresh script. At the same time, the old script also exists in the same paper. Now the Scarlet Letter is something like that. On the surface level, you are going to find a 17th century Massachusetts Bay Colony. But when you look deeper, when you try to understand the text a little more, you'll find how the text also gives us a lot of detail about the 19th century America, at least till the exact middle part of the 19th century America, that is 1850s, when the text was officially published. And mind you, this was done very, very consciously. Hawthorne did not write it in a way for people to interpret as such, or rather it's not that he did not know about this particular phenomenon. He was very deliberately putting these ideas so that the 19th century America is also appearing in the text simultaneously. Obviously the 17th century will also be known to us. So I'm going in like flow, okay? So this whatever I'm speaking right now is completely based on what I've studied. So don't don't think of it as those videos with charts and stuff. I don't have those things, and I don't also have a board with me right now where I can show you through descriptions. So so this particular time frame, okay, so we'll look at this historical palimpsest part. Once we understand the historical palimpsest part, understanding the Scarlet Letter is like a cakewalk, right? So there are layers of history. The first of these histories is the 19th century America. Now this particular time frame, this 19th century America, before the Civil War of the 1860s, was known as the antebellum America. Okay, so it's right before the war, that is. Now in the midst of this antebellum America, there was this elections of 1848, the presidential election, that is. The Whig Party won that election and the Democratic Party lost. The person who became the president was Zachary Taylor. Interestingly, he looks like Jeffrey Epstein, by the way. So you can make some conspiracy theories with that. So he won the election, the presidential election. And during that time, something which is called the spoils system was prevalent in America. What is the spoils system? In this spoils system, what happens? So the people who are loyal to the victorious party, the victorious political party, those people would get the jobs in America. So the loyal supporters would be given the jobs, okay, the civil services primarily. This was also known as political patronage. So our Nathaniel Hawthorne, he himself was loyal to the Democratic Party. As a matter of fact, because of certain of his acquaintances in the Democratic Party, he got the job of a surveyor in the custom house of Salem, okay, which we also find in the prologue that I already said, which is also titled The Custom House, where he literally writes quote unquote the posthumous papers of a destitute surveyor. So he obviously is writing about himself. But understand this. So in 1848, because of the victory of the Whig Party, now Nathaniel Hawthorne lost his job. Right? This one part is important for us to understand, because this kind of spirals into a lot of developments in the construction, in the creation of the Scarlet Letter. In 1848 itself, there was another major movement that happened, a convention that happened. This is called the Seneca Falls Convention. The Seneca Falls Convention, usually Elizabeth Stanton and Lucretia Mott, they are the ones who are associated with Seneca Falls Convention, but it was not that they were the only two people. As a matter of fact, on July 13th, 1848, in Jane Hunt's house, 5 ladies they met, which included, of course, Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Stanton, along with several other ladies. Then they planned on having this convention in Seneca Falls, New York. So they did not actually imagine, they did not comprehend the idea that many people are going to participate in this convention. They thought that it's going to be a small gathering, and then they'll discuss about what to do about this women, the strength of the women during that time, and the rights of the women during that time. Surprisingly enough, not only did a lot of people turned up, there were also men. So it was not, so they thought of only women who will be coming, but then a lot of men also turned up. So eventually the overall gathering was of 300 people. See, 300 people was a lot. Okay, this is not like today, right? It's not the age of social media, right? So to gather so much people just through the word of mouth, not that much of the written word, it was very difficult. Eventually, so 300 people gathered, and the convention ran for 2 days. And then on the second day, the first day and the second day combined. First day, the declaration of sentiments, and in addition to the second day, the declaration of sentiments and resolutions was passed by that particular convention. In that particular convention, this declaration of sentiments and resolution is extremely important. First, because the declaration of sentiments and resolutions is directly designed on the structure of the Declaration of Independence of America, right? American Declaration of Independence. A very particular line catches the eye. In the Declaration of Independence, it is written, all men, only men, okay, all men are created equal. Now what Stanton does, this draft was designed by Stanton, of course. Stanton writes all men and women are equal, and apart from this particular line, this particular phrase, the whole of the structure is actually directly mirroring the Declaration of Independence. Understand the importance of Seneca Falls Convention. The resolutions that were passed slowly and steadily, it kept growing in a steady pace. Of course, slow, but a steady pace. And because of this convention, women started coming out of their shells, and that gave rise to the first wave feminism, the suffragette movement, and the 19th Amendment of 1920. Sadly, obviously, of the 300 people, only one person could survive to see the 19th Amendment happen. Her name was Charlotte Woodward. That's of course a separate story. The point of this is that Nathaniel Hawthorne saw firsthand how women were slowly and steadily coming out of their shell. The feminist movement had started. We know first wave feminism is not associated with this particular convention or Mary Wollstonecraft or John Stuart Mill, but the idea, the concepts had already started to come, and the Seneca Falls Convention formulated this women empowerment already, which Nathaniel Hawthorne knew about. This was also important because around say 15-20 years prior to this, a concept was in vogue. This concept was called the cult of true womanhood. Now, this cult of true womanhood is also called the cult of domesticity. So, domesticity, by the word domesticity, you'll understand that women were basically domesticated. This cult of domesticity, this cult of true womanhood, was associated with 4 cardinal values: piety, morality of the woman; purity, the chastity of the woman; submissiveness, particularly towards the husband; and fourth, so piety, purity, submissiveness, and the fourth one was domesticity. So women were given a sphere, just and simultaneously men would also get a sphere, right? So there were separate spheres for men and women. The private sphere was associated with women, and the public sphere was associated with men. The Zanana Mardana and Ondar Mahal kind of concepts, right? So women were supposed to be inside the 4 walls. So this was obviously very patriarchal in nature. And during that time, Margaret Fuller came out and wrote this magnificent text, and the name of the text is Woman in the 19th Century. And there she writes this very extremely famous line. So she writes, "There is no woman, only an overgrown child." So women were essentially treated as children. So they were controlled, they were dependent on the men, right? And they were so that kind of dependence was something that she critiqued. So she wrote about, remember this for the future of this video also: intellectual freedom, self-reliance, opportunity to chart their own courses in life, right? So intellectual freedom, self-reliance, and obviously the opportunity to grow, right, and select their own course in life. So we already have the change in the party and Nathaniel Hawthorne's losing of job. We now have Seneca Falls Convention. We have the cult of domesticity and Margaret Fuller. But this was not all, right? The other development was associated with something which is called private rehabilitation. Now, private rehabilitation is primarily associated with the prisoners of New York. As a matter of fact, a group developed known as the New York Prison Association in December 1844. But it was not the only association. There were several other associations also that developed. One was Unwed Mothers' Home. So this unwed mothers, you can understand, right? So women who have children, but these are essentially illegitimate children, and so because they are not married. That's one. The second one was Magdalene societies, and the rescue of the fallen woman. This fallen woman concept had already begun in America during that time. The fallen woman is associated primarily with promiscuous activities and prostitution. Magdalens were considered women who had promiscuous relationships, multiple relationships, which was not considered to be good because of the cult of domesticity, because of the patriarchal setup. So so what was done to them was they were isolated. Okay, it was done with a good heart. The plan was not bad. It was basically in isolation they will grow and they'll understand their mistakes and they'll learn how to be better in life. So prisoners and unwed women and Magdalene women, fallen women, all these were categorized similarly, that they have done something bad, they've committed some kind of mistake. So they were kept in isolation, so that they rehabilitate and they become better citizens of this country. But this concept of private rehabilitation was highly debated, because it takes a toll on your psychology, right? You cannot just remain in isolation for a long time without any kind of socialization. So this was critiqued and debated, but the point is that private rehabilitation existed. Remember, whatever I'm saying right now, all these things are directly associated with the Scarlet Letter. We'll connect all these things later, of course, but all these elements are extremely important in the understanding of the Scarlet Letter, particularly from the point of view of a historical palimpsest. We move further and we look at something which is called the penny press. Penny press is important because it develops a lot of characters in our story. Now penny press, so penny press comes from the idea that newspaper rates, some newspapers, not all, some newspapers were now sold in just 1 cent, right? So 1 penny, and naturally it was now accessible to a broader working class audience. Now the working class was not that interested in politics. It was not that much interested in who's running for president and stuff. They were happy in their own life, right? Karl Marx had just come up and not many people were familiar with trade unions and stuff. So working class was still reading these tabloids, this small tabloids that existed. There were two specific newspapers which grew during that time. One was the New York Sun, and the other one was New York Herald, if I remember correctly. So, and these were independent of political parties, okay, and they would focus on this strictly on the daily facts of daily life. And in these particular newspapers, rather, there was this column which is called the daily crime column. These were breezy, colloquial, and frequently, written in prurient tone. They were treating the arrests of destitute citizens as form of dark comedy. Yeah, it used to mock the perpetrators for the entertainment of the public. As a matter of fact, interestingly enough, Walt Whitman, George Lippard, these people started their career by writing in these penny presses. Anyway, that's again a separate idea. So while writing about these different things, the new kinds of gossips started developing. Gossips in the sense like it was discursive. So in this day, because of this daily crime, there were certain caricatures, kind of characters, kind of people, which kept reappearing multiple times, right, in these daily crime columns. And 3 very specific troops developed, okay, that this similar kind of stories kept reappearing. One is called the Reverend Rake. So these are people from the clergy, people from the church, who on the face would be this great religious people, but they had a lot of promiscuous relationships. They would have affairs with women, and it used to get exposed in this daily crime column. So they would show people that they are these good religious people, and at the same time they would commit these different kinds of sexual relationships. So obviously with that would come the women with whom these Reverend Rake troop would have association. This and obviously prostitution also started developing during that time. So the concept of fallen woman, the fallen woman troop was the second troop that was extremely famous during that time. For fallen women, it's very easy, like women with promiscuous activities, basically. And the third is the feminist criminal. Okay, so there were women who would challenge the society, and because it was still a patriarchal society, they would be framed as criminals and eventually taken to jail. So three troops developed: Reverend Drake, the fallen woman, and the feminist criminal. This another thing during that time itself, which I don't know, but I can add. There's this concept of transcendentalism that developed, okay, particularly by Waldo Emerson. It's actually a lot intricate a text to study. So we'll perhaps do it in a separate video later, if at all I get the time and the courage and the energy to do that. But there are a few troops in the American Scholar. American Scholar is the text. It came out in 1837. There he writes about intellectual independence. What happened during that time was that most of the people would still read, would still study the British literature. Okay, the literature that came from particularly London, right? So America was still not developing its own great literatures, and Ralph Waldo Emerson would urge for a complete severance from the European literary traditions, and they would start thinking themselves. Okay, concept of man thinking. So people should think and start writing, literature of their own, and nature was to be taken as a teacher. So the romantic ideals were still, going on in America. So that is transcendentalism. Of course, Nathaniel Hawthorne knew about it. Some of the elements you can find in the Scarlet Letter, which is ecocentric, which is associated with transcendentalism, particularly the forest that we find in the Scarlet Letter. Anyway, so understand this then. During that time, this Reverend Drake troop was popular. The fallen woman troop was popular. The feminist criminal troop was popular. Women started coming out of their shells. There was the Seneca Falls Convention. There was Margaret Fuller who was writing. There was this presidential election that changed the way of life a lot. So all these things were taken into consideration by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And as I said, it was very deliberate. As a matter of fact, a person named Arthur Cleveland Cox, he was a critique of Nathaniel Hawthorne. He says that the Scarlet Letter is actually made for the market. So the characterization, the plot, the whole shebang was directly associated with what the people wanted. So it was a commercial text which catered to the demands of the audience. The demands, I'm not saying demands in the sense that the audience literally demanded for it, but the audience would definitely follow a text which would have a Reverend Drake, which would have the fallen woman, which would have the feminist criminal, which would have transcendental attributes, which would have this growing women, feminist, proto-feminist women, which would show the concept of power, the political power and patronages. So all these things considered. As a matter of fact, it is believed, it is in fact written by Nathaniel Hawthorne himself, the custom house, the prologue, also acts as a revenge towards the Whig Party, towards Zachary Taylor. So the driving force of the text directly comes from the context, the authorial context of Nathaniel Hawthorne. But then that's not the only context. Nathaniel Hawthorne was actually going through a lot during that time. There's a personal context associated with our Nathaniel Hawthorne, which is associated with the Scarlet Letter. We already know that he lost his job, right? So he's broke. Interestingly, he actually used to have a lot of debts before he got that job. So this job was extremely important for him. But then he lost his job, one. Secondly, what happened a year later, in July 1849, he also lost his mother. And it was like he writes in one of his texts that it was the darkest hour of his life, obviously. So he was broke already, he was poor, and now he was extremely sad, he was depressed, he had nowhere to go, right? So he somehow gathers the courage. So after July 1849, he takes some time, and in September 1849 he starts writing. Begins writing the novel that is the Scarlet Letter. In nearly 5 months, just 5 months, he completes writing the Scarlet Letter, which is a huge feat, because it's not like today. He did not have that many resources, so he had to be very consistent and very fast at the same time. So it took 5 months. He completed the novel by February 1850, and when he was reading the last chapter in front of his wife started crying. Sophia, I think, the name of his wife. So she started crying, and Hawthorne took that as a massive success, okay, as a sign of massive triumph. So he was successful in publishing the novel, and the first when the novel, when it was finally published, the total number of published copies were 2,500. In 10 days, within 10 days, all the 2,500 copies got sold. It was a bestseller, and today we know it for good reasons. It was the bestseller. And then obviously Nathaniel Hawthorne's life changed altogether. Why did it sell so many copies? Because it catered to the audience's demand. What the audience wanted, they got. So Arthur Cleveland Cox was correct, right? It definitely was correct. So and his history as a surveyor played a very important role. He added a real historical figure in the Custom House prologue. Okay. In the Custom House, there's this character known as Jonathan Pue. Jonathan Pue is a real character who existed and who worked in His Majesty's Customs in Salem from 1752 to 1760. In a newspaper named the Salem Observer, in 1833, it was written that his grave was disturbed. And when his grave was disturbed, a lot of other things were found. One thing that was found was a wig, okay, a wig of majestic frizzle. Why I'm saying about this? Because this wig has some importance. I'll tell you right now itself. So, Pue's life was reimagined, okay, and his life was reimagined as a local historian. So it's written that how Pue would gather resources, information from the local people about the history of the place, and then he suddenly died. Okay, so his papers, his records were kept. Remember, all these things are fictional. The character, the person is real, but these different things, that he was a historian and he was compiling certain notes and stuff, these things are fictional. So in the Custom House, inside the Scarlet Letter, Jonathan Pue is referred, and it is said that he found his papers, the papers that he documented. He, in the sense, the Locofoco surveyor, that is Nathaniel Hawthorne, found the papers written by Pue in the Salem Custom House. Okay, and there's this imagination of Jonathan Pue appearing in front of the Locofoco surveyor, wearing this immortal wig, this majestic frizzle wig that is associated with Jonathan Pue. There also, this cloth could be seen. The cloth is found by the locofocus surveyor, and there's this letter A that is being embroidered. The letter is scarlet, of course, of scarlet color, so the scarlet letter, but it is embroidered with golden threads, and it was of 3.25 inches. Remember this 3.25, we'll come to it a little later. So these personal histories, this personal knowledge of Nathaniel Hawthorne also is directly associated with the Scarlet Letter, continuing our ideas of historical palimpsest. Now, it's already a 36 minutes video. I didn't think that it's going to be that long, and we are not yet in our main territory, that is the 17th century context, and from here it becomes massive. Okay, so far let's quickly have a summary of whatever we did so far. So the Scarlet Letter is definitively a historical palimpsest. It has elements of 19th century, it has elements of the growing feminist figures, it has elements of power politics, it has elements of the troops that the audience preferred, it has elements of the state, it has elements of Nathaniel Hawthorne's personal experiences, it has elements of ecocentrism. So a lot of things that we find in the Scarlet Letter was actually in existence in the 19th century, both in the general sphere and also the personal sphere of Nathaniel Hawthorne. It is directly intertwined with the 17th century context. Now, remember that the place that we find in the Scarlet Letter is Massachusetts Bay Colony. Why the Massachusetts Bay Colony is important? Because it was the first complete colony of the 13 colonies in America. When I say complete, I'm not saying prosperity wise. Okay, complete in the sense it had a lot of people, it had proper governance, it had religion, it had families, 20,000 families came there, and 20,000 people there. So everything was set up properly in Massachusetts Bay Colony. But what about the colonies that came before it, and why Massachusetts Bay Colony is more important in that case? The discovery of America plays a pivotal role in that understanding. You've heard of Christopher Columbus, but Christopher Columbus was actually people did not fathom a fourth world. They thought that the world is composite of 3 continents, 3 parts: Asia, Europe obviously, and Africa. So on August 3rd, 1492, Columbus went west to find a sea route to Asia, and he was convinced. So he went west and he was convinced that he found the coast of Asia when he reached the Bahamas, and he recorded the landscape, right, as the formal property of the Spanish crown. See, he was Portuguese, but he went through the Spanish crown, so he recorded this formal document for the Spanish crown. Later, Amerigo Vespucci, he analyzed the geography that Christopher Columbus had created. While analyzing the geography of the western lands, he realized that it did not align with the Asian coast, and he wrote this document known as the Mundus Novus, that means the New World. From there the New World comes, and that was a huge revelation. That also was the reason why the discovery of America is associated with Christopher Columbus, but then the structuring, the geographical structuring is associated with Amerigo Vespucci. And then there was this third person. There was a German cartographer, if I'm not wrong. His name is Martin Waldus Müller. Okay, something like that, pronunciation wise. So he printed this New World map, and he labeled this newly discovered land as America, in the honor of Amerigo Vespucci. So America comes in the honor of Amerigo Vespucci. See, the first colony that was established in America was not actually by the English people. As a matter of fact, they were a century late. The first proper colony was the St. Augustine, Florida, and this was set up by Spain in 1560s, 1565. And there's this wonderful history. One of my favorite things in this colony, in the establishment part, the first attempted establishment was in Roanoke in 1585. This establishment I'm talking about, the English establishment, okay, the English colony. So the Roanoke was the place where firstly a team was sent, and it was exploratory, so a military expedition was sent rather, and they were exploring that particular area, that is the Roanoke Island. However, because of the Anglo-Spanish war during that time, the ships could not be sent to that particular coast and for like on time, and it got delayed. Later, when the vessels were eventually sent, in the Roanoke colony, attempted Roanoke colony, there was no one. Okay, all the people mysteriously disappeared, and there was on one wood, the word Croatan, Croatoan, was engraved. Just that word, that's it, okay, nothing else. So there was this mysterious disappearance, and all they could find was one word, Croatan. This particular colony is still considered as the lost colony, which became a topic of a lot of text in the popular literature. Even in certain shows you are going to find the lost colony, Roanoke, Croatan, all these different words reappearing multiple times. Later, there's one wonderful news piece also. I'll share the news piece in the description maybe. Later, it was through archaeological evidence, it was there was a theory that was going on that these people actually went and assimilated with the Native Americans, and this theory got established by a later anthropological study. So the first attempted colony was a failure. Then some, not many, but some people, male only by the way, only men, went to this place which was later named as Jamestown, Virginia. This eventually turned out to be the first official establishment. It also nearly failed, by the way, because the weather conditions were not, the climate was not well to be assimilated by the people, and they were not getting any fertility also there. So however, they eventually could grow tobacco, and the tobacco plantation, and also because there was this intense internal conflict between the people, they could establish the colony in Jamestown, Virginia. So that became the first official colony. It is in 1607. After that, this famous story comes. The Protestant separatists, Pilgrims. A religious team then went to America in 1620. Understand this, they were separatists, okay, they were not happy with the church. So they moved to Leiden in Holland, the Netherlands, that is, in 1608. Now, they were there for some time, but they were there in England and they were separatists. They knew about their belief systems, but the children did not know. So the children, they started getting assimilated with the Netherlands people, with the people from Holland. So they were getting accustomed to this Dutch culture. So obviously the separatists were not happy, and they wanted a separate land, a separate place where they can teach their children better, and obviously develop their own village. So the New World was already known to everyone, so they decided to go to America. Okay, they had their own American dream. They wanted to go to America to create this society based entirely on strict religious beliefs. This famous ship, this famous vessel they took, everyone knows about this, Mayflower, right? Mayflower, the great Mayflower voyage. They set shore on in September 1620 for and that the whole journey continued for 66 days. That part most people know, but you know what the interesting part? The interesting part is that there were actually two vessels. The second vessel not many people know about. The second vessel is named Speedwell. Now the Speedwell leaked so badly that it had to turn back. So around 102 passengers who were there in Speedwell also hopped in Mayflower. So it was overcrowded. They were called the strangers, by the way, the strangers, the people who were going in Mayflower. So Speedwell to chala gaya, so Mayflower had to eventually go. So now the Mayflower, because it was overcrowded, it was weak, it was not that strong of a vessel also, so it started having leakages, and the force of the ocean was also not helping. So they were blown off course. And they wanted to go to Hudson, near Hudson River. They wanted to reach Hudson River, but because of this forced movement of the vessel itself, they instead reached a place named Cape Cod in Massachusetts, instead of Hudson River. There, within themselves, they created this Mayflower Compact in 1620 November. So they promised to create this civil body politic. So they basically agreed to govern themselves. Okay. So that actually lays seeds to the modern American democracy, the Mayflower Compact. It is actually considered to be the first of the practices in modern American democracy. So, but it was very difficult for them to survive there, right? So they stole, as they literally started stealing some buried native Indian corn out of sheer desperation to survive. And that particular site where they built their village eventually, that settlement was in December 1920. This new settlement was named Plymouth. Okay, Plymouth, Plymouth. And it was built on a village, an abandoned village named Pouxet, Pouxet. So they were living there, but it was, as I said, it was very difficult for the survival because they did not know about the land that much. But the Native Americans did, right? A person named Samoset. Okay, Samoset. He was a Native American. He boldly walked right into the camp and said, "Welcome, welcome." Why this word is important? Because a Native American is not supposed to know the word welcome altogether. So when he said the word welcome, everyone was in shock, like, what just happened, right? A Native American has come and he spoke an English word. Then we come to know that he actually picked this language from a passing European fisherman, and he was not the only one who knew English. There was another person, the famous Tisquantum or Squanto. Squanto was later brought by Samoset, and through Squanto, who was also an interpreter, Squanto also showed them how to farm using fish as a fish, dead fish used as a fertilizer. So Squanto was pivotal as the interpreter who helped these pilgrims, these separatist pilgrims, have an alliance with the local chief. Okay, Massasoit and the pilgrims eventually made a pact, and they had this 3-day feast. And that 3-day feast, interestingly, was considered to be the first unofficial Thanksgiving. Why I'm saying unofficial? Because after 50 years, so this laid the foundation. It was a happy-go-lucky kind of foundation in people, and both parties thought that they were benefiting. But the Britishers slowly and steadily started annexing more and more land, particularly after taking control of Massachusetts. And 50 years later, there was this Pequot tribe which was completely Pequot tribe and Metacom King Philip, that is. So there was this war that eventually took place, and after 50 years, the whole of this alliance fell apart, and then the first official Thanksgiving took place. But that's for separate discussion, maybe. So why I'm saying all these is because we get the idea of how the colonies developed. Okay, the colonies coming, the Britishers coming to America and developing these colonies laid the foundation. These first Roanoke, and then Virginia, and then Plymouth. This laid the foundation for a better, more impactful kind of migration to take place. Because now the people of America, the colonizers, knew enough about America and how to survive there. So then took place the Great Migration. The Great Migration happened in the vessel called Arbela, originally named the Eagle, but it was respectfully renamed the Arbella in honor of Lady Arbella Johnson, a woman of noble birth, actually, who was a passenger in the ship, and the wife of Isaac Johnson, who interestingly was the largest stockholder in Massachusetts Bay Colony. So in Arbella, there were people who would eventually reach this place, Massachusetts, and they'll develop a city. What kind of city this? Governor John Winthrop, while they were still in Arbella, gave this famous speech that they are going to build a city upon a hill. A city upon a hill, which is going to be the model of Christian Commonwealth. They were well funded. Their stated goal was to convert Native Americans, and there were 20,000 people, 20,000 Puritans. These are not separatists, by the way. These are people who align with the Puritan belief system. So 20,000 people went to this new place, the city upon a hill, and that is why this particular migration is called the Great Migration. And there was this unification of the church and the state leadership. Now they actually document all these things, right? So there are these literal agreements that are created regarding meetings. Okay, so the people will give updates, information, everything, in fact even money, and these discussions used to take place in London. So they obviously had their own documentation, but then there was this big loophole, the 1629 loophole. King Charles I forgot to stipulate where the Massachusetts Bay Colony Board will meet. So there was no concept of meeting, there was no concept of being answerable to the state. Because of this complete removal of meeting altogether, they could take themselves as autonomous. So this particular loophole granted them the autonomous status. So now Massachusetts Bay Colony was self-operating as a colony. So it was, you'll think of it maybe, okay, it was a great thing, happy thing, so the state, the king is not interfering altogether. But this is where things go downhill. They wanted to create a Puritan utopia. Okay, in Massachusetts Bay Colony, they wanted to create this Puritan utopia, and they were following the covenant theology. So for people who don't know about the covenant theology, there are different kinds of covenant theology. One covenant theology is the covenant of works. Now the covenant of works is associated with Adam and Eve. Adam was considered to be the federal head. Okay, but because of the sin that he did by eating the forbidden fruit and stuff, this particular covenant of works collapsed. Then there was this another covenant that developed. This is the covenant of grace. Now the federal head of this covenant was Jesus Christ, who would come to earth and suffer for, the story, right? Suffer for human beings and all these things. So that covenant was actually believed by people. So the idea was that innately all people are sinful. Okay, all people are sinful, and Jesus Christ is the only one who has saved. But uh, Jesus Christ himself is pious, Jesus Christ himself is a God, but the people are still sinful, right? So he just is taking the suffering, but the people have not changed. I hope you're understanding the concept. So Jesus Christ is suffering in the stead of these people, for these people, but the people are still sinful. So the idea is, there's a presumption that people, human beings, are innately sinful by nature. Okay, this is the concept that was associated with the Puritanism of that time. There was this third kind of covenant that developed through and through because of this. This is the covenant of redemption, and this was developed by the Puritans and the Reformed theologians. So basically, in this covenant theology, the concept of Calvinism developed. I'll come to Calvinism in a while, in 2 minutes maybe. By the speed I'm going, it might take 5 minutes. So practical social structure was being formed by the gathered churches. So they would set up churches, and a social structure was formed, and the members literally signed written covenants promising to obey God and walk together in faith. So this laid the foundation for the local civil governments, which was mostly theological. It was primarily associated with religion. In Massachusetts Bay Colony, they followed the biblical laws. So basically, and this laws were very interesting, because the laws were Mosaic, and it came from Leviticus and stuff. The idea was that everyone will be rewarded if everyone is doing well. Everyone, each and every single person is here a part of this particular idea. So everyone, if they do well, then God will give them earthly blessings. Any sin by anyone, out of 100 people, if only one person also commits a sin, then God will destroy the entire plantation. You're getting the problem, no? 100 people, all the 100 people have to be good, have to be morally right. If one person also, and remember this is 20,000, okay, so if 19,999 people are doing good and one person is doing bad, still God is going to punish them. He's going to take away the entire plantation. So what happens? No one can trust anyone, right? Neighbors would turn against each other. So there was a literal police as your neighbor. You are also a police of the neighbor. Everyone is policing one another. So everyone needs to be good. If anyone goes bad, it's going to be devastating. So the whole community had to follow this particular theology properly. Calvinism essentially developed because of it. Calvinism is based on this abbreviation called TULIP, TULIP. T stands for total depravity. So the idea is everyone is essentially sinful, as I already said. Then comes unconditional election. So God has already elected people who will eventually get atonement, which brings us to the third of the abbreviation, that is limited atonement. So not everyone is getting atoned, only a few selected people are getting atoned, and these people cannot resist because of this immense force, spiritual force. They cannot resist the grace of God. So that's the fourth of the abbreviation, that is I, this irresistible grace, and the fifth one is perseverance of the saints. Okay, so the saints were considered to be, that is why they were considered to be the most respectful ones, and everyone followed what the saints said. So the governor, the reverend, okay, all these people, whatever they said, their words were taken as the law of God, okay, as the word of God. So naturally, in Massachusetts Bay Colony, everyone had to be pious, everyone had to be morally correct. There was no scope for anything which is illicit in the eyes of God. And the people who were controlling all these, who were the judges of all these, were the members of the church, right? So this might look as something which can be dealt with, but it's not that simple, right? Because everyone has to participate, everyone has to do well. So all these things together, okay, when all these ideologies, the power of the church, the state, the governance, the laws, the people, the Calvinist elements, all these things together had to come and bring in a core idea, right? There has had to be a committee to monitor all these things. So in 1641, the Massachusetts Body of Liberties was developed, which was official. All these things earlier were all ideas which were put in separate vessels. Now everything comes together, and the Massachusetts Body of Liberties was established in 1641. And they believed the Old Testament's Mosaic laws, okay, based on John Cotton's Moses and Judicials, I think. So a person named Reverend Nathaniel Ward drafted the first comprehensive written legal code in 1641. And then there were punishments, okay. There were some punishments that were being discussed, capital punishments. And these capital punishments were rooted in the Old Testament, punishable by death, most of it, okay. Idolatry, worshipping any god other than the Lord God, was considered to be a capital punishment. Witchcraft, being a witch or consulting a familiar spirit, okay, this is directly associated with the Scarlet Letter, Ann Hibbins, and the forest, and this whole episode. Anyway, so witchcraft, blasphemy, directly, expressly and presumptuously cursing or blaspheming the name of God, the Father, Son, or the Holy Ghost, irrespective. Anything of this, anything wrong you do, anything you speak against them, is considered to be blasphemy. Premeditated murder or slaying through guile, then kidnapping, okay, false witnesses, all these things were considered to be capital punishments. More importantly, particularly in our context of the Scarlet Letter, the strict sexual morality was based directly on the book of Leviticus, and Deuteronomy can also be referred to. Anyway, so adultery becomes very important. If a person committed adultery with a married or espoused woman, so supposed to be married rather, both the adulterer and the adulteress were to be put to death. While this extreme penalty was rarely carried out, it was famously enforced in 1644, when a young woman named Mary Latham and her lover James Britton were tried, convicted, and obviously hanged for adultery, as Leviticus explicitly regards sex with neighbor to be sinful. So both were put to death. Then there was problems with sodomy and bestiality. There were problems with fornication. As a matter of fact, there were executions of rebellious children who were just over 16 years. So they would rebel against their parents or maybe the state. So they were also executed. And there were biblical justifications of slavery also. So all these things were going on from a religious point of view. Important, very important from the aspect of our story, particularly the whole episode associated with Hester Prynne. Two people. While I'm saying all these things, they were judges. Okay, they were judges, as I already told you. Out of all these, there was one particular judge who would persecute the Quakers primarily, who would send away the Quakers because they did not follow the religious dictum of Massachusetts Bay Colony. So a lot of people were persecuted under his judgment, and the name of that person was William Hathorne, first of the relatives. Anyway, so there was Roger Williams, who arrived in Massachusetts a little late, like in 1631. He came in Leon. The ship, the vessel's name was Leon, and he was a rebel. Okay, he argued that the English king had absolutely no right to claim Native American land and grant it to colonists. He was banished in 1635, and then he built this colony named Providence, which eventually would be renamed as Rhode Island. And along with, why I'm stating Roger Williams, because in the text, in the Scarlet Letter, we have references of Ann Hutchinson. Ann Hutchinson was just like Roger Williams, who came a little late in 1634. She came with her family, the Hutchinson family, of course, and she also brought numerous children, and she settled in Boston, Massachusetts. She was a respected midwife, nurse, and she was a spiritual leader also. And she was someone who heavily promoted the covenant of grace. Okay, she was also someone who believed in Jesus Christ and that all people are innately sinful and stuff. But she also believed that most of the local ministers were not following the order because they were developing this new covenant, right? And they were wrongly also preaching at the same time. They were also wrongly preaching the covenant of works. So essentially, eventually, there was this antinomian controversy. Basically, she was being trialed for being against the moral law. She challenged this patriarchal order. Okay, she challenged this patriarchal order, and she went through the civil trial, the civil trial of 1637. But she knew the Bible very well, and for 2 days she defended herself brilliantly. The people of the church who were, who considered themselves as extremely knowledgeable, even they were not able to beat her for 2 days. But then on the third day, she made this fatal claim, okay, that she has direct connection with God, that the God reveals things to her. This divine revelation was thought of, and then the patriarchal mindset was that how will God come to a woman and tell everything to her? So they believe that this is completely blasphemous, this is completely untrue, and she is just lying in front of us. God is not going to reveal himself in front of her. And she was also exiled. She was exiled to Rhode Island. Okay, she actually founded Portsmouth of that particular area. There are multiple Portsmouths, by the way. She founded the Portsmouth of Rhode Island, and this eventually assimilated together with Roger Williams and stuff. The point is, Ann Hutchinson was someone who questioned the this authoritarian government, this extremely radical people of Massachusetts Bay Colony. And that is why when Hester Prynne is being associated with Ann Hutchinson, being a similar kind of woman. Okay. Now, I told you already that this is a historical palimpsest, and we are discussing all of it from the historical palimpsest point of view. Now, our critic told us about two ages, the 19th century and the 17th century. She particularly talked about the 1640s and the 19th century, the earlier part of the 19th century. But this is where it gets a lot more interesting. I love the Scarlet Letter, by the way, because of its layers. Okay, this is I feel like The Wasteland wanted to be something like that, but T.S. Eliot thought that people are really dumb, and that is why he started giving the footnotes. I feel like Hawthorne did all these things and just prayed and hoped that people will find out, and I think many people did. A lot of people have added the third layer of this historical palimpsest. There is definitely the 1640s Massachusetts Bay Colony, there is definitely the 19th century America, but then there was this one how do I put it? So supposedly it's like a lens. Okay, it's like a lens through which you are looking at something. So in 19th century, Nathaniel Hawthorne is looking at 1640, looking towards 1642, which is 1640s Massachusetts Bay Colony, but through a lens. This lens is the Salem Witch Trials. What is the Salem Witch Trials? It's immensely interesting, fascinating to begin with. I already told you about witchcraft, right? In the capital crimes, I told you about witchcraft, and it was taken very seriously, mind you. In 1648, a woman named Margaret Jones was suspected of witchcraft, and she was executed. In 1651, Mary Parsons of Springfield was executed in Boston, and Ann Hibbins, who also, by the way, appears as a character in the Scarlet Letter, she also was executed in 1656, June 19. So witchcraft, persecution, execution of people, all these witch hunting was already going on during that time. And in 1689 came this person named Samuel Parris, Parris, okay, in 1689. And in his home, two girls, Betty and Abigail, they were playing with eggs and glass, okay, a glass of water. This particular play actually has a name. It's called Oomancy, Oomancy, and it's a divination game. It's a forbidden game. The game was like this. So you separate a raw egg white and drop it into a glass of water. Okay, so the egg white, you drop it in the glass of water, and the participants would interpret the results by looking at the shapes to predict the future, okay, or uncover hidden truths. So they just wanted to see the faces of their future husbands. They were little girls, okay. They just wanted to look at the face of their future husbands, but instead they saw the vision of a coffin inside the water. After that particular vision, they started having violent fits. They started screaming. They started having seizures. The seizures, this screams and these fits obviously scared Parris, and the local doctor was called. The doctor had no explanation of this, like why this thing is happening. And because this idea was already there in this covenant theology and all these Calvinistic elements and stuff, because of this extreme radical religious belief systems, they thought that this is done by the devil. As a matter of fact, I forgot the name who said this, the person who said this. He said that we are so good in following religions, our religion, we are so good in following our belief system, that we become a very easy target for the devil. Okay, where would the devil go? Where he will find people to manipulate in abundance, nah? So because everyone, more than 20,000 people now, obviously, everyone is following the religion so well, everyone is following their belief system so well, so the devil will definitely come there only, because bots are there's so many people who the devil can manipulate, right? So they had this belief system that devil lurks in the corner only. As a matter of fact, in the Scarlet Letter, there is this forest which is outside the city upon the hill, and it was believed that it was the home of the devil, the black man, by the way. Okay, even there this racism comes. So that idea, the belief system that devils existed, was there pretty much, and so the devil, so they blamed it on the devil, right? They blamed it on the devil, that this thing is happening because of the devil, and the fits, the seizures, that is. So accusations of witchcraft just spiraled out of proportions. So everyone started thinking that, okay, yeah, this is the person is the witch, this person is also performing this kind of witchcraft and stuff. And it was gender neutral. It's not that it was only associated with women. Even men were hanged. Okay. So the overall death toll, and this is so weird, 22 people died. Okay, 22 people, not people, sorry, 22 died. The death toll was 22. Why I removed the people part is because there were 19 people who were hanged to death. One man was pressed to death with stone because the man was refusing to enter a plea. Okay. And along with these 20 people, 2 dogs who were killed because they were suspected to be the assistant of the demon. So because these dogs were suspected of demonic assistance, even they were killed. But how do you kill? You need evidence, no? So how do you prove witchcraft? There's no way of proving that. And then this weird system developed, which is called the spectral evidence. Spectral evidence, I'll tell you an analogy. Supposedly, you're in a school, you're in a classroom. There are 2 children. You are the teacher. So supposedly there are 2 children. You meet them today. The next day, a child comes and tells that in my dream, the other child, killed me, or the other child beat me up. Now, based on this child's testimony, you punish the other child. Getting it? So this child just told that I saw this in a dream, but taking the word of this first child, you are punishing the second child. Spectral evidence is this. Spectral evidence is if a person just claims that this person is a witch because I saw this in my dream, or I saw this person were flying over a tree. Even with this evidence, this much evidence, just by the word of mouth, the other person will be executed, killed. Weird, right? But who does that? Who judged that? There were judges. There were a lot of judges. But there were specific judges who were very powerful. In the 1692 Salem Witch Trials, there was one person who first executed a Bridget Bishop, who also happens to be the first person to be killed in the trials, hanged at the Proctor's Ledge on June 10th, 1692. This same person, this same judge, also, was in the trial of a woman named Tituba, who eventually survived by giving a false confession. This person was also in the trial of a woman named Sarah Osborne, who died in a freezing prison. This person was also in the trial of a homeless beggar named Sarah Good, who was eventually killed. Sarah Good was eventually killed. And Good's 4-year-old daughter, Dorothy Good, was manipulated into giving testimony against her own mother. And this small child was also shockingly sentenced to imprisonment, where she was kept chained in a dark, overcrowded dungeon. This judge was responsible for the unfair death of 20 people, and this judge did not repent altogether. The name of this judge is Colonel John Hathorne, the second relative of Nathaniel Hawthorne, about whom Hawthorne writes in American notebooks. Hawthorne writes, in the custom house, this Colonel John Hathorne is the grandfather of Nathaniel Hawthorne. So I told you at the very beginning of this video that this person, Nathaniel Hawthorne, was ashamed because of the abuse of power that at least 2 of his forefathers committed. And Now, why the Salem Witch Trials is important? Because this witch hunting took place against Hester Prynne, if not directly, of course, indirectly. And Hibbins is there in the Scarlet Letter. And Hawthorne deliberately showed the problematic society of Massachusetts Bay Colony that eventually made the 1692 Salem Witch Trials happen. I told you already how deep the text goes. The text on the face value is very simple, I keep saying. But in reality, the text tells you so much about the American history. Now coming to the last part of the historical palimpsest. This would be associated with the real life references that we find in the Scarlet Letter. I hope that the video will be over soon, and I'm 100% sure that no one is going to reach this 1 hour 20 minute. I'm pretty sure that this is not going to happen. The point of this video is gone. But anyway, since I started it, I'll finish it. So the real life references. We have Hester Prynne. Isn't this a weird name to begin with, right? Hester Prynne. Hester, not many people are named Hester. At least in 1640s, there's no real chance that people will be naming someone Hester. And Prynne is such a odd surname to have. As I told you, Nathaniel Hawthorne is what T.S. Eliot wants to be, I feel at times. Because the name Hester Prynne comes from the amalgamation of two names. Prynne comes from William Prynne, who was a pamphleteer. He was taken in the court of Star Chamber. The Star Chamber, by the way, derived its name from the stirred chambre. Okay, so they basically the place was literally decorated with golden stars on a blue background. William Prynne was a person from England, obviously, and he was punished. This by this court of Star Chamber. This court of Star Chamber was operating in secret, but this operation one was done by the complete knowledge of the king or the queen. So actually, the king or the queen actually sanctioned them to make these punishments. There was just one catch. This court could not, sentence anyone to death. So they would give them other methods of punishment. So under King Charles I and his Archbishop William Laud, L-A-U-D, Laud, of the Star Chamber, they weaponized this particular court to attack political opponents. As I said, our William Prynne was a pamphleteer, so he wrote this pamphlet known as the Historiomastics. In the Historiomastics, he attacked stage plays and was perceived. This attacking of stage plays was perceived as an attack to the queen, insult to the queen, and so he was, sentenced with life imprisonment. And that's not all. His ears, subjected, the upper parts of his ears, they were cut off. This was the sentence that was given against him. While he was still in prison, he was locked in the Tower of London. Prynne still continued to write pamphlets, and he used to smuggle this. Okay, and these were highly critical pamphlets. These pamphlets denounced the Archbishop and it was perceived to be creeping off Catholic. So the Archbishop was perceived of creeping of Catholic practices into Church of England. So Archbishop was also critiqued, as not only critiqued, he was censured, he was insulted. Okay, so again, obviously the court came to know about it. He was called again, and whatever of his ear was left, upper part was already cut, the lower part was also now cut. So the remaining stumps of his ears were now also lost. He had to pay a sum of £5,000, and Here is where our William Prynne has direct association with Hester Prynne. The cheeks were branded with SL. SL means seditious libeller. Okay, seditious libeller. Seditious libeller literally means a publisher of booklets. It's in Latin. Okay, so the complete meaning is a publisher of booklets that cause people to go apart. She was perceived as a rebel. The original meaning was this, right? Publisher of booklets that cause people to go apart. It had one meaning, na? He later wrote a poem, and there he renamed the seditious libeller to Stigmata Laudis. Okay, so the meaning changed. The meaning now became Scars of Laud. Okay, that's it had double entendre, as a matter of fact. One meaning was Scars of Laud. This Laud was directly associated with William Laud. At the same time, Laud means praise, lauding someone. So the second meaning was a direct literal. It was the second was a literal jab. The first was literal jab to William Laud, and the second was signs of praise. So this SL was actually now signs of praise. So Stigmata Laudis meant two things. Three meanings of SL. Three meanings of the letter A in the Scarlet Letter. See how direct association with William Laud happened. William Prynne happened. And the second, so Hester, right? Hester as a name is also very interesting. You might not have heard Hester, but you must have heard Esther. Esther was a name that was in existence. Esther was a name that could be found in certain variants of the Bible also, the Old Testament, I guess. So who is Esther then? In the book of Esther, you will find that there was this Jewish orphan named Adasa. She was raised by her cousin named Mordecai, okay, Mordecai, in the Persian Susa, Persian Susa, Susa. She had to change her name, obviously, because this Jewish name means that there is a good chance that she'll be, caught. Jewish people are not accepted everywhere. All these things. So she took the name Esther. Esther literally means hidden. Esther means hidden. Okay, hiding a secret. In the Scarlet Letter, Hester Prynne also hides a secret. The secret of her lover, also the secret of her husband, right? Roger Chillingworth is also not exposed by Hester Prynne anyway. So she took the name Esther, which means hidden, to conceal her Jewish heritage. Now there was this king named King Ahasuerus, or Ahasuerus, who ousted his his queen, Queen Vashti, and he was in search of a new queen, right? So a lot of the girls from that place were taken into the royal harem, and in that harem, so from that harem he was supposed to select this new queen. So one after the other, these women came. Some were terrified, some were being overexcited and stuff, but she was very graceful and she was beautiful, and this won the king's heart. So the king crowned her as the Queen of Persia and Media. There was a person named Haman from the army of the king. He was the chief counselor, as a matter of fact. So he used to treat the locals badly, and once he actually insults Mordecai, the cousin of Adasa, or the cousin of Esther, and because Mordecai refused to bow, right? So Haman tricked the king, and he was about to kill the Jews from that particular place in the 13th of Adar. Okay, so Esther So Mordecai came to Esther and asked for her help. So Esther made this brave choice. What she did, um, she first of all she fasted for 3 days or 2 days, and then the rule of the place was that no one goes, particularly the queen, definitely does not go and meet the king if until and unless she's summoned. So unsummoning, so if she goes and meets the king unsummoned, then she will be killed. Okay, she will be killed immediately. So she held this 3-day fast, and the 4th day she actually went to the king. And remember, she was unsummoned, so there was a good chance that she would be killed. And then she declared this famous declaration of Esther's famous declaration, that is, if I perish, I perish. If I die, I die. So she went with all the bravery. She went, and the king was actually very pleased. Okay, so the king welcomed her, and he was so pleased that he said that I'll grant you your wish, whatever you want. I'll even give you up half of my kingdom if you want to. Esther says that no, I don't want your kingdom, but please have 2 banquets with me. Okay, so the king said, okay, fine, if you want to have a banquet with me or 2 banquets with me, fine. So a banquet, a lot of other people are also there, right? So in the second banquet, Haman was also present. So what Esther did, Esther exposed Haman, who plotted against her people, and tricked the king. So now the king was extremely angry, and Haman was executed, and the Jews were granted the right to defend themselves, because this was also one of the wishes of Esther, and they defended themselves. By the way, because the king was tricked and the king accepted this attack on the Jews, he cannot change his word, so he had to modify it a little bit. So the modification was that the attack will take place, but the Jews can defend themselves. So they successfully defended themselves as well. So Esther became this great heroine, and extremely powerful, courageous kind of heroine, just like our Hester Prynne, who also is a very powerful heroine, the first great American heroine, who also hid certain of her secrets, right? So so Esther is also associated with the establishment of Purim. So those are there. Apart from these 2 characters, so Esther and William Prynne together, their stories merge and bring in the story of Hester Prynne, right? The story that is how Hester also changed the meaning of the letter A, and and how she also was a headstrong lady, and who also took certain brave decisions and successfully hide the secrets that she had. Obviously, at the end of the story, Arthur Dimmesdale reveals the secret. It's a completely different thing, but Roger Chillingworth's secret still remains. So these things happen. So it was very deliberate, very consciously associated with so Hester Prynne is very consciously associated with William Prynne and Esther. Together, their stories merge and bring in the story of Hester Prynne. But there were also certain characters which were directly associated with the real life counterparts. One was Reverend John Wilson. John Wilson is pretty much there in the Scarlet Letter, obviously fictionalized, but he existed in reality. He was England-born Cambridge graduate who embraced Puritanism and before emigrating. So he eventually migrated in 1630 with Winthrop, right? And he established, or rather helped to establish the first church of Boston, and he was the pastor of that church for 37 years. Okay, remember the Antomian controversy that we talked about? He was one of the persons who clashed with Ann Hutchinson, and Ann Hutchinson saw his preaching too legalistic. Okay, and his followers actually walked out on his sermons. Okay, so Hutchinson was successful in turning his followers against him. So he also rallied support for Winthrop in the 1637 election, He was there in he also was pivotal in the fall of Hutchinson, as I already said. He is the one who excommunicated Hutchinson in 1630. One extremely pivotal point associated with John Wilson. John Wilson was not shown as a good character, okay, understand this, because he had this iron hand, no, particularly associated with Hutchinson. But one pivotal moment from history, actually, Wilson was present at Winthrop's deathbed in 1649, praying with the governor in his final moments. And in the second scaffold scene of the Scarlet Letter, this is directly matched. Okay, there is this comment that falls, and John Wilson is also there, and we come to know that John Winthrop is dead, and all these things are happening in the Scarlet Letter. So direct association. Also, there is Governor Richard Bellingham, who also happens to be a real life character, a real life person with whom this character, the Governor Richard Bellingham, is directly associated. So in the text, in the Scarlet Letter, we do find Governor Richard Bellingham, and he actually existed in reality. He was the founding investor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, Massachusetts Bay Company, not colony. He was the founding investor of Massachusetts Bay Company. So he was associated with the capitalism, the capital investments of that particular place. He emigrated a little late in 1634. He was considered to be arrogant. He was considered to be combative. But these are not the things that are pivotal here. What's pivotal is actually his marriage scandal and his sister. Marriage scandal, I'll tell you. He himself was he was a governor. But after his first wife died, he married a much younger Penelope Pelham, without posting the legal marriage bans. So he did not follow the the matrimonial procedures. It was not shown to people. People were not in the knowledge of this particular thing. So whole of this system was a scandalous affair. Okay, his second marriage. As a matter of fact, knowing that this is going to be scandalous and controversial, yet and the other ministers were also not happy with it, yet he married. And who officiated his marriage? He himself officiated his own marriage, which is again problematic. So he officiated his own wedding, and he refused to step down from the bench when he was charged with this particular scandal, and this case was dropped because he was obviously powerful. He was rich also, right? The other thing is his sister. His sister was Ann Hibbins, the same Ann Hibbins that we find in the Scarlet Letter, the same Ann Hibbins that I told you of a little earlier, who was executed for witchcraft in 1656. So here we go. So this is there are things that you might find here and there, but this is the glimpse which took me nearly 1 hour 40 minutes. The Scarlet Letter is based on the ruins of all these things that we discussed. I feel like I should have a separate video for that, which I'll shoot right now. Well, in the sense, like I'll post the two videos separately, because this video I'm 100% sure that no one is going to watch all two. I don't know if the overall video they'll not watch, or they'll not watch the video altogether. If someone wants to watch it, if someone reaches at this point, great. I'm extremely thankful. This completely unexpected, but one thing I'm sure of: if anyone reaches at this point, they must have learned a lot about the base of the Scarlet Letter. They must definitely have learned about the 19th century a lot. They must have learned about the 17th century, the discovery of America, so on and so forth, the Salem Witch Trials and stuff. So I'll shoot the next video right here, right now, after completing this one. So that will be completely on the textual analysis associated with this video, by the way, of the Scarlet Letter. I'll not take the summary wala route. I'll try to associate everything with this particular video with the historical palimpsest, because that is, according to me, how the Scarlet Letter is supposed to be approached primarily. Okay.